Good morning. My name is Dr. John Haas, and I teach at Cerritos College. And I cannot believe it, but I'm here in the heart of Big Bend National Park. And I have a famous park ranger here. I have Jennette Jurado, who has driven us out 30 miles to this fantastic spot. And it's just absolutely unbelievable. So Jennette, thank you very much for doing this.
My pleasure.
And I wanted to ask if we could just kind of set the scene a little bit by telling our audience here the location that we have out here. Where are we?
Certainly. Well, we're in the Big Bend of West Texas. So Big Bend National Park has most of that kind of corner of West Texas where the Rio Grande is its Big Bend. And this is part of the Rio Grande right here, now flowing into Boquillas Canyon right behind us. So we're on the very eastern side of the park here, and directly across the river is Mexico.
I just saw recently there was somebody on horseback there, and I see a gentleman over there. Is that Mexico?
Absolutely.
So we have sometimes reportings. You said people said there's somebody across there, and you laugh and said, well, there's a man in Mexico, and with his dog in Mexico. So okay. So if you could take us, what do we have behind us?
All right, so behind here, in the distance, we have the town of Boquillas, Mexico. Just across the border, we have a community of a couple hundred people that live over on the Mexican side there. The river makes a nice bend over here, so most of this floodplain is in the United States, and then comes around and curves when it flows to start carving the channel into Boquillas Canyon here.
Big Bend, no other place on earth like it. What makes Big Bend so unique?
Well, this park is truly special because there's so many interesting things that come together right in this corner of West Texas. We have, I'll just start from the ground up. We have over 130 million years of rock layers deposited here. The next longest geologic history in the Park Service is only 53 million. So 130 million is truly unparalleled in the Park Service. So we have these ancient limestones, these Cretaceous deposits, all the way up through some fairly recent volcanic activity, upwards of about 17 million years ago. So this rock kind of sets the foundation of the landscape. There's so much diversity just of rock types, which build these great canyons, this really fascinating scenery, but also then sets the stage for a diversity that a lot of people don't expect to find in a desert corner of West Texas.
Can you talk a little bit about that diversity?
Absolutely. So this park has, when it comes to just species diversity in the U.S. parks, it has more species of birds, butterflies, bats, reptiles, scorpions, cacti, ants than any other national park has.
I think I remember there was like 59 varieties of cacti or 450 types of birds that are in the vicinity.
Yeah, it's truly amazing to think about that kind of diversity within a desert ecosystem. But it's not just desert here, it's also the mountains, which are forested, and the riparian edge of the Rio Grande as well, that helps build this diversity in this corner.
Can you talk for our audience about riparian so they know what you're talking about there?
Absolutely. You can kind of see the edge of the river here has this nice green tint to it. So the water here allows for other species to be able to grow that aren't surviving just up here on the hillsides, which is true desert, dominated more by cacti, shrublands, grasses. Down here you get your mesquite bosques, you get river cane. We have just a variety of species that without that water source won't grow.
There'd be no survival, so no floodplains. So very important material there. I find it interesting, a lot of the rangers will talk about all of these habitats that in essence, you could start off with the Chihuahuan Desert. You could go up to 7,000 up in the Chisos Mountains, and then you have the kind of unifier, if you will, of the Rio Grande River. So there's all these beautiful places, all these beautiful habitats in one particular place, which is very unique. And one of the things that kind of hit me, I remember you talking about the diversity is one of the strengths of Big Bend. I want to know kind of a hypothetical question. Does that kind of context here apply to human beings? That is, it seems when we talk about nature and we talk about diversity, it's a real big strength. It's a power. Is it also a power with humanity with all of our diversity?
I think that question's a little bit out of my my sphere of knowledge within this park. But
Let me ask this.
one of the things I love about this country is that there are so many different ideas that help found not just national parks and what we choose to protect and preserve across the National Park Service. I mean, you have people who are passionate about the historic sites, about the big national scenic parks as well, but also about the recreation areas. So even just within the Park Service, the different types of ideas that go into helping us develop what's important to our nation to preserve, I think speaks a little bit to that. There's power in diversity.
Yeah, that's excellent. I wanted to ask you, I've watched a lot of video of you. I've gotten a lot of different perspectives. And one of the things that really stuck with me, that you said that we have these three major habitats, and we have the opportunity to preserve it. And that really resonated with me. I think it resonated with me because I'm enjoying the park. Visitors come and enjoy the park, but it's for me. I'm glad that I get to take all these habitats out there, but you're talking about the opportunity to preserve it. What do you mean by the opportunity to preserve?
Well, I think one of the really interesting things about the U.S. national parks is it's not just me doing this. It's our country, our politicians deciding that this is important, that this is worth us as a nation investing in. This is taxpayer dollars that fund national parks and the entrance fees that people pay to have the privilege of enjoying these fantastic areas that we preserve. So it's the will of the people that makes these national parks even be here. If it wasn't for that creation of a National Park Service in 1916, would we have places like this? I know that goes back, question to answer a question, but I think these things make parks really special. That it's not I have decided, but we have decided as a country that this is something that we want to do.
Well, it seems to me that you're really focusing on a unique opportunity. I guess what I'd like to ask, what is my responsibility, or what is the responsibility of Americans to preserve what we have here?
I think the responsibility of the people that come to the parks, but also not, is just recognizing that these places are important as a nation. In order to create a park, you have to have a national significance. It has to be important to the story of our nation to protect these places. And if people were coming to the national parks and leaving trash behind, or letting the resources get degraded by walking over the plants, not staying on the trails, by driving off the roads and creating ruts, these places wouldn't be these just truly spectacular, pristine environments anymore. So it's really a partnership between the park rangers. It's our job to help steward these locations. And we get the messages out to the public, but if the public doesn't respect the rules that are in place, we would lose a lot. The fossils that go in people's pockets, the arrowheads that are taken from these places, all degrade a national park. So if our visitors aren't interested in keeping these places for everyone to enjoy and just wanting to take solely for themselves, it's stealing from our country as a whole then.
We have to give this to posterity. We have to protect it, preserve it, look
Absolutely.
after it, respect it, so that our
I'd
children...
Exactly.
Right.
We want our grandchildren and their grandchildren to have the same experiences in these environments as we do, to still have wild places, to still have this diversity on the ground, and not take away from those generations.
When I say wall, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
It's physical bricks and mortar, and I think most people's minds, it's physicality.
Is it delineating boundaries? And let me go there.
People build walls in their houses to have shelter, to have protection, but also there's walls to separate, like a fence in your backyard.
Well, one of the things that I think of is with borders and boundaries is division. And I believe that you had spoken about that nature is saying something totally different to the divisiveness that we have in dividing, using the Rio Grande as a dividing point. What is nature telling us? So one of the things I wanted to talk about with my own students at Cerritos College, we were just talking about the Mexican-American War and the Treaty of
Hmm.
Guadalupe Hidalgo. And at the end of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the United States agreed to pay $15 million to Mexico. Mexico lost almost 50% of her territory, and the Rio Grande became the border. It became the
Hmm.
division line in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And so I think of that as a border. I think of it as it a boundary. And yet it seems to me that you say that the landscape, the natural landscape, is saying something different. What is the landscape telling us here in Big Bend?
Well, a river is a river. It has a floodplain on both sides. Behind us, we have this mountain range that continues across the river. The river cuts right through it. And the landscape is essentially one unit down here. You have two sides of a river. You have species that cross in both directions. You have mountain ranges. You have the geology that crosses in both directions too. So when you look down at a floodplain like this, it's not readily apparent that you're looking at two different countries because you're looking at one river, floodplains on both sides, and the hills and landscapes. It's essentially one ecosystem that we have a political divide that runs through the middle of.
Hmm. So in many ways, it would almost appear that the Rio Grande unifies people. It brings people together, or has the possibility to bring people together. Okay, one of the things that you had mentioned was the fact that you love traveling into Mexico because we are partners. I've seen a video with you at Falcones,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to talk a little bit about that particular relationship that Big Bend here, Big Bend in the United States, shares with Boquillas and other places in Mexico.
Absolutely. We're talking about this river having floodplains on both sides, having ecosystems on both sides, which means then that if we were to do treatments of the river to take care of invasive species or to help do habitat restoration, if we're doing it on just one side of the river, the job is half done. So we don't have the jurisdiction to go across and do the exact same thing in Mexico. So in order to work on landscape level restoration and ecosystem preservation here, we partner with Mexico and the National Park Service here come together in order to treat this river as one functional unit, as the one river that it is. So absolutely, the other side of the river here is protected by CONAMP, which is the Mexican equivalent of the National Park Service. So we have protected lands on both sides of the river. We have scientists on both sides of the river. We have ecologists on both sides of the river. And so we partner together in order to have two nations treat one river as a bigger whole.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can cross over into Boquillas, and a number of the people that you'll find around town there actually at different times are working to help with the river here. Just like if you were around the national park, many of the folks you find around here are also parts of the stewards of river treatment projects. Many of us wear multiple hats. One day I'll be doing information at a visitor center, the next day we might be on a search and rescue, and a different day we might be doing scientific studies or restoration projects. And same with a lot of the folks in Boquillas. They might be rowing you across the river today, but in a few days' time, they might be going on an international river trip with CONAMP and Park Service people working on both sides of the river to remove things like the exotic river cane and help restore the health of this river.
Mm-hmm. I've seen in Canada and the United States a friendship park where they come together and work. And I believe that this has not happened with Boquillas or with Mexico. Is that a true statement?
We don't have an international park designation here,
Okay.
but in essence, we function like an international park already
Mm-hmm.
because we do have these collaboration, we have this close communication, we have these international and interagency restoration efforts that we do. So we already function like two parts of a bigger unit
So you're
without
saying
having that designation.
pragmatically it's already taking place, it just doesn't have that designation?
Exactly.
And is there some hurdle or some impediment to making this happen? Is that something you would like to see take place officially?
You know, those questions I think are way above my pay grade, but I'm happy to definitely be in a park that already functions with this close collaboration and these partnerships already.
I want to ask a question, and I'm a little worrisome to ask the question. I'm trying to make this as apolitical as I possibly can, but I would really like to get this just from your work and your love of Big Ben. If there were more reinforcement, stronger border walls, I'm talking about a physical, what would the impact be on the flora and fauna?
Because we haven't really been given any specifics of what a border wall would look at in this location, those hypothetical questions are going to be really difficult to answer.
I want to step in because I've watched other videos in Arizona that would talk about herding and talking about ranchers and talking about people's lives that would be affected, because of a wall. And I grant you it's hypothetical, figuring out what the wall actually looks like. But I'm just kind of curious what you might anticipate that would happen to the changes that would take place to the animals. It's such a unique, beautiful place. And one of the things I've noticed, and what kind of drew me here, was watching a lot of people on both sides of the political fence that were just brought together over Big Ben. I mean, that really resonated as a historian and somebody who studies political science. I'm well aware of what's going on. The divisiveness between Republicans and Democrats is unbelievable. So one of the things that hit me right away is like, and I've seen signs all over it, like don't mess with Big Ben, leave it alone. We don't need a border wall. I was in a bar last night where everybody opined that we don't need a wall. The terrain is rugged. So even as someone who is not close to Big Ben, I have worries, I have concerns, and I haven't spent my last 12 years working, at the park to kind of figure out what would happen to the animals and to the lives and the way of life here.
Yeah, I hope you'll be able to capture some audio in town that will be able to give it really from their perspective a little bit more.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Jim, I think I have a couple. Is there, just while we're thinking about this, other things that you feel that you would like to, I have a couple other questions, but I don't want to walk away when you said, oh, there's really something I should have, and I like this because we can cut it and go back and get the best bits of you. But I told you originally that this was for my students, and I really wanted to share Big Ben, and I've only been here for a little time, but I'm already blown away. I mean, I guess having a 5-hour drive, you get to see some things, but
and this is on a gray, not particularly spectacular weather day either.
Yeah,
so
I'm loving the.
you can imagine it with the
weather.
shadows and the sunlight and the blue skies.
Yeah. So, but is there anything else that you think you would like to? I go through a couple things that I have down here, and then we can go back in here that I have not asked.
I think you already brought up some of the main points. Big Bend is really a lovely place to live and work because we have such a positive experience down here. We have this incredible resource on the U.S. side, and we have a positive story along the U.S.-Mexican border where we have these close relationships. We have this international collaboration that the landscape doesn't end at the end of the river. So I think we captured a lot of that already. But having a story of hope, I think, is important.
I'm usually very good when I watch videos or I want to interview somebody to know why. And I ask myself, why do I want this particular person for any interview? And what's the tension? What's the narrative? What's the story? And I don't know you very well, except from videos and emails, and today my first opportunity to meet you. But one of the reasons I was really attracted to the story was you are incredibly genuine. I really get that feeling of being genuine and honest and very helpful and conciliatory. But what I want to kind of capture here on the film is what is your passion. You exude so much passion for Big Ben that's infectious. I mean, I'm watching, I think, oh my God, I got to go see this. Who is this Jennette? I got to email her and get there. So when you come out here, and I said this when we got here, I don't know anybody that would drive a stranger 30 miles down the road to do an interview to bring them to a wonderful place. I think you may be in an office or maybe right outside. But what gets you up in the morning? What gets you excited about Big Ben?
think after spending 12 years in a place and still being surprised by it, it really keeps me growing here. That there's still more to learn, even after investing literally a third of my life into one park and one place, to still be surprised by it, to still be intrigued by it, to see different things, to capture it as it changes over the years has been really an honor for me.
That's fantastic. I did, one of the things I was interested in, being very, very dark here in the lower 48 states, and I want to ask you, what kind of memories do you have from the people that have come here that have been blown away by Big Bend that you would like to share?
Oh, after 12 years of watching people, well, quite literally fall in love with this place, it's been quite an honor to be able to share that part of their lives with them. We have people that come back year after year because it's part of their lives now. We have visitors. We had a couple that used to come every year on their anniversary, and you start remembering these faces over the times. And then one year he came with his sons because his wife had died, but they wanted to keep that together.
So he was preserving that memory by coming here?
And that this park was so important to their family, to their story. It just,
Is it true that
brings
people
tears to your eyes.
Is it true that people have seen the Milky Way for the first time when they came here?
Oh, yes. I've had people literally crying at my visitor centers, recounting seeing the Milky Way for the first time in their lives. Grow up in a city like I did, you just see the major constellations on a good night. But here in Big Bend, we actually have the darkest night skies in the lower 48 states. We're an international gold tier award-winning park, and that's the highest award the International Dark Sky Association can give to a place. So other reactions are, the stars would have been great except for this huge cloud that was just going over the middle of the sky. There weren't clouds last night. That was the Milky Way. You were looking at your home galaxy there and just watching that light bulb go on, that they never knew what their own galaxy looked like.
Any other stories that come to mind? I reflect on my 25 years of teaching. Sometimes you'll see a student come back and you immediately go back into time, joys, experiences that you've had with the people in your last 12 years.
Yeah, indeed, you do start to recognize faces of the people that have truly gotten this park. They understand how special it is, and now they're emotionally invested in this place too. And that kind of connection of watching visitors respond to the park in the different seasons or with future trips has been a pretty big honor in a career as well.
It seems to me that I just heard you mention that you grew up in a city, and I believe that you went to Calvin College. And I was just wondering, did anything at Calvin College prepare you to do the work that you're doing here in the national park? I believe you were an artist and you're a scientist. Did a combination do anything?
Yeah, I haven't really thought about how to answer that question before, so.
Well, that's a good question then.
Because I usually don't talk much about my personal life. But wanting to tell the story about the park instead, because it's so much better than I am.
Yeah,
this is really the story. This is the special thing about this place. I'm just
but you're special too.
A tool of the National Park Service
you're
to
clearly
communicate
special,
it.
And I'm just curious, what kind of degrees, what kind of qualifications? Did you bring something special that works well in the national park?
I think a foundation of not just liberal arts, but focusing on both science, having that biology degree, and art is really an interesting pairing for a national park like this. You can't help but want to take pictures when you're in this amazing landscape. And knowing how to do that, but then how to communicate what you've taken a picture of, what the geology is, what the ecosystem is, what kind of biodiversity you have here. It's really a kind of fun bringing together both that right and left side of your brain.
Yeah.
I want to see this park in 100 years giving the people the exact same experiences that I've gotten to have here. I want to see the canyons. I want to see the cacti. I want to still be able to go out and find archaeological sites that are thousands of years old. I want to share the history, I want to share the biodiversity, and still see people taking pictures, or whatever the technology might be in the future, to capture just how amazing this place is.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of the goal of the parks, is to preserve these special places. Well, not really preserve, because ecosystems change, but to conserve, to make sure that these stay as special and wild and pristine as humanly possible.
Mm-hmm. Is there any other things that you would like to leave for an audience, people that don't know things about Big Ben, something that you said, we must know this, this is something that we have to take away as I go back?
Wait for the wind. Yeah, get your paper. Calm down.
Yeah, I think what I'm, as we kind of wind down, just trying to figure out what the future, looking at the future, and kind of looking back at what you want people, what should I take away from Big Ben when I go home?
Wilderness and wild areas are important, and that's exactly what national parks are trying to conserve, to make sure that people can still get to a place where they can disconnect, where their cell phone might not be ringing every 5 minutes, because this is a place where nature is the important thing. To get out and walk on a trail and not hear the sirens in the background or your neighbor's barking dog, to get out of these intense populated areas, these cities, and come back to nature, I think is really important for the human spirit, and a major reason why these national parks exist.
It's almost a little scary, the quietness. We had some wind last night and some motorcycles, but besides that, coming from California near Los Angeles, it's a little eerie to begin with when you're looking around. Oh my God, it feels just absolutely so quiet in here, and this is absolutely breathtaking. And we've only been here for a short while, so we're looking forward to it. So,
Yeah. Might even argue that solitude is an endangered human condition now, that you really have to force yourself to truly get away. This is more than just going into your room and closing a door. It's getting out and experiencing something that's only natural sounds, only natural vistas, and can be incredibly refreshing for people. One of the new things is just wilderness therapy, getting people who have had traumatic experiences into a wilderness location like this has been very effective.
Very therapeutic for the people coming in.
Absolutely, just to be able to decompress, disconnect, change the way that your brain is focusing, change those thought patterns, can be really helpful. And it's not just for people who have been through intense trauma. It's, I think, an everyone experience to come out into nature. You see people just breathe a sigh of relief sometimes.
I'm blown away looking at the river. And if I didn't know any better, I just said, I don't know what side is what. I don't know where is where. This river here. And it's just kind of wonderful to be in that particular bliss. That is, it seems to me that the landscape is speaking to me, just telling me it's a river. That's what it is. And there's greenery by the river. And there's a gentleman with a horse. I don't know whether that's Mexico or not. There's cacti here. There's just incredible place for all human beings to enjoy. And it seems to me in some ways that Big Ben is a fantastic unifier. It transcends people. It brings people together. The river unifies people. We have a common responsibility to work with the people in Mexico to preserve and conserve these areas. We're partners here.
That's a really great way to state that.